Hi, I'm Leonard Davis. I'm interviewing Mark Mallory about Newport Beach's first power couple, Ned and Dora Hill, who I used to live next door to when I was a kid. So, Mark, good to see you, and thank you for consenting to the interview. Can you tell us about when Ned and Dora came to town?
Sure. Let's start with telling you that my name is Mallory because my mother and Hank Hill married when I was about 8 years old, and I became part of the Hill family.
Okay.
So a lot of my knowledge is hand-me-down from the family. A lot of my knowledge is firsthand, and a lot of the knowledge was just told to me by Grandma and Grandpa Hill, which would have been my grandparents growing up. Mm-hmm. Dora and Ned moved to Newport from Pasadena in 1938. He owned and operated a lumber yard and came down here, and after he bought Ackerman Boat Works, which is the shipyard on Lido Peninsula, currently called Newport Harbor Shipyard. It used to be called Lido Shipyard in its past days.
Okay, and did he buy the whole business then, and they own the peninsula as well? Or?
The peninsula was leased by the shipyard from, I want to say, the oil company or the railroad, one or the other. I can't remember, but they utilized a small fraction of the mud flat, as Grandpa used to call it. And after the war, then they built boats for the Navy for World War II there.
Mm-hmm. Do you know how many boats he built?
I don't, but they built
PT boats, probably, huh?
No, they built 98-foot wood tugs.
Okay.
And they also built 40-foot launches for the Navy. That's as far as I know. Mm-hmm. And an interesting little caveat is I brought my dad, who also owned a shipyard in Newport, to the shipyard. And there's a restaurant in the shipyard now, which kind of made my dad roll over in his chair, but having a restaurant in a shipyard.
Oh,
and I asked him what
talking about Sabatinos?
Yeah. What was that location? And he said you got to go back to when he was 7 years old, and he said that was the loft shop. Lofting is where you'd have full-size blueprints. After you'd make a section of the boat, you'd put the wood onto the blueprint and look and see if it matched, and if it did, then you'd install it. So anyway, they moved on to Lido Island and bought a house on the bayfront. The story goes they bought on a Sunday because the developer was running a special. If you buy 2 lots on the bayfront, you get 1 for free if you bought it on a Sunday. Apparently it was an all-day event to come down from Pasadena, which is where the market was for selling homes. Most people went to church on Sunday and worked Monday through Friday, so that left 1 day, so they were trying to motivate people to come down on a Sunday. He bought the house at 615 Via Lido Sud, which was a 4-bedroom model home. He bought both lots on the bayfront with the model home, and they gave him the lot on the inside, which he said was worthless because it was a sand lot with just pavement roads going between them. And he paid $6,500, and he said that was a gamble whether that was going to be a good investment or not. And 617 was the yard.
Yeah.
In those days, all the houses faced sideways, horizontal. They didn't view out to the swamp or the estuary as it was. The 617 lot was later turned into a 3-bedroom with a guest quarters house where they lived, and I kept my little racing catamaran on the sand in front of their house. That's the reason I have a lot of knowledge about Dora and Ed, because I spent a lot of time there as a sailboat racer in Newport and other places. My early childhood, and then even in my teenage years down there with friends and crew and racing. And And then in my later teenage years, as my parents traveled, my parents being Hank Hill and Joan Hill, they would leave me at Grandma and Grandpa's house, Dora and Ed's house. And I loved it because they had a guest house which was detached, not detached, but separate from the main house. And
Was that the little room off the garage?
Yeah.
So you spent time there. Now I remember Ned had a little room off the garage that I guess he had his radio, his shortwave radio in there. Something I remember he used to be on that. That's a little guest room you're talking about?
No, there was an actual bedroom with a bathroom off the entranceway.
Oh, okay.
Ned kept his radio equipment in the garage in a small room, or a small space just forward of the garage.
Yeah. Okay.
It was intended as a workshop space.
Yeah, I remember that.
That's on the other side of the house.
Now I know Dora was more politically active, and he was more active with the yacht club.
Well, he and 3 other guys started Lido Isle Yacht Club, and you can get that information off the articles on the wall at Lido Isle Yacht Club.
Okay. And
I know his name is mentioned with 3 other gentlemen starting the yacht club. He was involved in the island scout troop. He was part of one of the founding members of the Goof Offer Club, which is a group of retired guys that would meet and apparently goof off.
They finally started allowing women to go to that in the very end of the time, because my mom was kind of involved there a little bit. But then I know he was he wasn't one of the early Commodores, but I guess you're talking about Rudder and Tom Rudder and Cliff Chapman, because I know they were the first.
He was a Commodore at Newport Harbor Yacht Club.
No, I mean I'm talking about Lido.
Lido Isle Yacht Club.
No,
not Newport Harbor.
He wasn't a Commodore, but he was. I know he was like race committee chairman and things like that. But he's not listed on the Commodore list. But
all right. Well,
but I know Dora was president of Leica, and because she was president of Leica in the 40s, and then went on to become active in city politics. Are you aware?
There's a little segue in between. Yeah. So after Lido Isle Community Association president, she then became president of the PTA at Newport Harbor High School.
Okay.
And became a deacon at St. Andrew's Presbyterian. Became the first female grand jury foreman in Orange County. And then ran for city council. And apparently the story that I was told, that the city council person that received the most votes was the mayor for all 4 years. It isn't like it was today where it rotates. You're a mayor for the duration. So
she was in for a while. Now there's a story that she told me, because I interviewed her many years ago for a book that I wrote, and she said there was kind of a scandal that policemen were told, that people were told to call the police station to let them know they would be out of town. A lot of people didn't stay here during the winter. And then it was police people who were robbing the homes. And this became a big scandal, and there was a big movement to throw the bums out and, new broom sweeps cleaning that. And she was kind of involved with that. That's what she told me. Did she ever tell you that story?
Never heard that story.
Never. Anyway, so she got elected because of the disgust of the corruption that was going on in town.
I was told, she told me that one of the things she was most proud of was putting an end to Bal Week. Are you familiar with what Bal Week is?
Oh, yeah.
I guess upwards of 100,000 kids would come and invade Newport in the 50s and the 40s and sleep on the beach and have a great time, but not leave the place as nice as they found it. So the residents were frustrated, and they police department couldn't prevent it or stop it. So she somehow was able to stop it.
Well, she was.
And then there's the stories about her friend George Hogue that she organized the beginnings of Hogue Hospital.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because I know she was a major player in Hogue Hospital back in the day.
The way I was told the story went was George George Hogue had all the property up on the bluff there, and he was interested in developing it. Grandma was mayor, and there was no hospital in Newport. I think the closest hospital was Santa Ana. So she made a deal with her friend George to donate land for a hospital, and she would see that it got permitted. So I have, and I'll get you a copy of it, the original picture of Dora and George with the gold-tipped shovel, turning the first shovel of dirt. So at that point, she had the land for a hospital, but she had no money in the coffers. But she was a deacon along with Ned, her husband. They were both deacons at St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church.
Yeah.
So the way I heard the story was that she put her hand out to the wealthy constituents of St. Andrews for funding to pay for the first building. And apparently that's why it was Hogue Presbyterian Hospital. And over the years, Presbyterian has gotten pushed further and further down the name title to, it's now Hogue Memorial Care, whatever, Hospital Presbyterian. It keeps, I expect that it'll be dropped off soon. But
that was a big step though to get it going. So, and then after she was mayor, what did she do?
I don't know.
She kind of left politics, like, obviously.
I think so.
Yeah, okay.
I have a couple of good anecdotes that she told about her time in politics.
Sure.
Apparently, the city was run by an old boys group, and pretty much the same guys for quite a long time. And there had never been a woman in Newport politics. So after the tally of the vote was taken, whoever was presiding in the city council chambers at that time said, "Now, Dora, you don't really expect to be mayor, do you?" And she said to me, she says, "Why, yes, I do." She stood up and took the gavel and sat down. And the rest is the history. She was very popular, from what I know. You can see her on videotape. In those years, there was a game show that Groucho Marx emceed. I can't remember the name of it.
Oh, yeah, I think I've seen that.
So
clip.
she was a guest player on Groucho Marx, and you can still see it online.
Yeah, I remember. I think I came across that one time when I was looking her up.
So Ned, after the war, sold the shipyard to the Kirchie family, who still own it today.
Yeah.
They arranged to buy the property from either the oil company or the railroad, I can't remember which. And then they developed it with mobile homes, along with kind of dividing up the shipyard complex into now what it is now, with offices and the Marine Center and the dry storage. The shipyard at one time. Somebody
I interviewed recently referred to it as the Kirchie Trailer Park or something. Was that an official name, or?
I don't know.
Yeah, and then I know they've recently redeveloped it again and all that. But okay.
After I was going to say after the shipyard years for Ned, he went on to start Mariners Bank over on PCH, which burned in the early '70s. Had a fire. That whole Mariners Mile Center had a fire, and it spread to the bank, and then.
Well, I remember that bank because I think it was called United California Bank at one time.
Right. So
I had my first savings account there, and and I remember my mom taking him over there, and we sat down with Ned, and he signed me up for my first bank account, and I put $5 in there, and I had my little bank book.
Right. And it was an independent bank at first. It was Mariners Bank, and then it was bought out by UCB, and then First Interstate, and then I think it's Wells Fargo now.
Yeah.
And after that, he went to work casually as an emeritus vice president at Bank of Newport, which was Ron Rogers, who was his protege at Mariners Bank.
Yeah, I remember that bank because when I took my money there, and along with Dick Richards, he was involved as well, as I remember that. And that was a great
Dick
bank.
Richards and Ron Rogers, and Bruce Brusso were Richards and Brusso were investors. Rogers was the operating owner.
And Roy Rogers, did you say? Or?
Ron Rogers.
Ron Rogers, okay. And let me write that down. And Ron Rogers, and what was the other guy's name?
Bruce Brusso.
Bruce Brusso. Do you know how to spell that?
No. BRUSSO.
SSO. Okay. Yeah, I remember that bank well. It was a great bank.
Yeah.
And then they transferred us to the other California bank. So, okay. And yeah, I remember Ned in those days. And then, let's see, I remember, my memory of him particularly it was election night 1966, and Ronald Reagan had gotten elected governor, and he came over to my house, and my dad and him enjoyed some martinis or something together to celebrate that event.
Ned was an active investor and ran an investment club out of his house. People would come seek his investment advice often.
And so when did the family sell the house on 617?
617 was sold when Grandpa died, and that was about 1986, I believe. And I believe he was 98 years old.
Yeah, he outlived Dora, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, a few years.
Yeah, she had degenerative arthritis and became one of the original health food cooks that I knew. She made zucchini bread and oatmeal cookies, which was all fine with me when I was cold and shivering with
good comfort
wet
food.
clothes coming in from sailing on the bay year round.
So do you happen to know what the sale price, you told me how much they paid for it originally, and I know they sold the house to my parents for $60,000, so they recouped their investment tenfold after 10 years or so.
Yeah, in the 80s, I think 86, it was sold to the Ross family, Gene Ross, and I think they paid $1 million.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think there's a Carolyn Ross that lives there too.
Carolyn, right.
So,
and Betsy Ross, their daughter, and I went to Harbor High School together.
Okay. So that was a good buy for them.
Hank Hill, who was my stepfather, but it grew up with him in the house as my dad, went to Harbor and graduated in 52. I graduated in 77, and my kids graduated in 2 years ago and 4 years ago, respectively.
So 3 generations of Harbor High people.
And Grandma was PTA manager there for the 4th.
Okay. Any last other things you can tell us about them?
Probably going to take a little while to remember them. We're going back to my childhood and 40 years ago.
Well, I think this is good, and I really appreciate the interview and your time, and I do look forward to seeing those pictures. And,
one funny thing was amongst some of the mayoral duties were she was to hand out the trophies for things like the Ensenada race. One year that she was mayor, my dad in his schooner, that one right there, won their division. So there's some good photos that used to be in Lido Island Yacht Club case of her handing the cup to her son, Hank, my dad. My father, Hank Hill, was also in the boat business. He owned and operated the shipyard on Coast Highway, known as Boatswain's Locker. They owned the property, so in the late 80s, they sold the property to the investment firm that built those gray Cape Cod-style buildings, which they call Mariner's Mile. They moved the shipyard engine sales operate part of the company to our concrete tilt-up building on West 18th, and that business has flourished. And under the ownership of my dad's partner's son, kind of my counterpart, so to speak, Dan Gribble, and I own and operate a yacht brokerage here in another shipyard called Sea Spray Boat Yard, which has been recently taken over by South Coast Shipyard. This is an old captain's campaign desk from the 1800s that belonged to my dad and was in my dad's shipyard.
So you've been in the boat business forever then.
Yeah, long time.
Now, do you broker boats, or do you actually are involved still building them, or
Not building, refurbishing.
refurbishing? Okay.
I buy and sell for myself to buy classics, fix them up and sell them, and use them, play with them. And then I buy and sell for customers, both buyers and sellers.
You do this here, right?
Yes.
Yeah, this is your Grand Central station here. Okay. Yeah, we would like to thank you very much for your time, and it's been very interesting, and I enjoyed talking about Ned and Dora because I remember them very well and very fondly. So, although I do remember being scolded a few times as a child when I was making too much noise or whatever in the yard. Oh, one funny thing I can tell you though is they had a pier and a boat dock put in front of their house late in the last years that we were there. For I had no dock at all. But I remember I used to play in the sand on that side of our dock, of our pier. And I dug up the sand so much and I wouldn't, smooth out the beach when I was done. And a lot of it got washed away and they had to pump new sand up on the beach. And I was told, play on the other side. So,
Yeah.
But
One of the fun stories I heard from Ned was how his son Hank, my dad, when he collected crappy little wood boats, and when they became too worn down or demolished to be useful anymore, he would stack up the wood and set it fire on the beach on Lido.
Yeah. I don't remember that, but that was probably before my time.
And so my son asked Hank, how many houses were on Lido when you moved on as a little boy in 1938? And my dad went, 6.
Yeah.
He also asked him what was on the inside, and he said it was just a big sand lot in the 30s where they used to build bicycle jumps, and they had a big pit where they kept snakes. And
Well, I remember Dora telling me they used to keep sheep on the island.
I never heard that one.
Or they didn't, but I mean people did, and she said they would be out there grazing in the middle of the island. And then when it was a windstorm, all the dust would blow off Lido and fly up into Newport Heights and get it all sandy up
That's
there.
interesting. I've never heard the sheep story.
Yeah. And
But
then
I've heard lots of Goat Hill stories.
Yeah.
In fact, we had a boat named the Governor of Goat Hill.
the governor. Okay. Now, I know there were 3 sons altogether.
Correct.
Are any of them still living today?
No,
No. Okay.
all 3 have passed. Hank was the last one. Brother Tom passed away about 8 years ago, and brother Kim, who was the oldest, passed away 25, 30 years ago.
Yeah.